I'm Alara Vance, 31 years old, founder of Quantum Leap Innovations. My company was just about to close a deal that would net me $10 million, a sum I'd poured my life into building, brick by painstaking brick, through years of tireless effort and relentless dedication. This wasn't just money, it was validation, proof to myself and to the world that I wasn't the dead weight my father once called me. Yet my family, especially Marcus, still treated it like a quaint hobby, a temporary phase before I settled into some predictable, less ambitious existence. Playing business, they'd sneer, a phrase that always felt like a condescending pat on the head. That's why, when Dad texted about an urgent family meeting regarding my future finances, a cold chill ran down my spine, a premonition of something sharp and calculating lurking beneath their feigned concern. They stole $10 million from me. They thought I had lost everything, that I was broken and ruined beyond repair, a naive girl finally outsmarted. But if you're wondering why I'm smiling, sitting here now in my new high-rise office, overlooking the city that once felt so alien and hostile, then you'd better stick around. That smile isn't about the past, not really. It's about what came next, a quiet satisfaction for a trap well laid, even if I couldn't see it all clearly then. My current outward demeanor is calm, poised, but my internal monologue hints at a deep, winding history, an unresolved past that demanded a decisive future. My mind drifts back to that fateful day, to the very moment it all began to fall apart. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation in a darkened alley, no sudden ambush by masked strangers. It was far more insidious, cloaked in familiarity and the twisted pretense of family love. I remember the air in Marcus's opulent study that afternoon, thick with an unspoken tension, almost suffocating. Brenda, my stepmother, sat primly on the edge of her armchair, her usual flamboyant diamond jewelry strangely muted, her eyes darting nervously. Leo, my cousin, fidgeted relentlessly with his expensive phone, avoiding my gaze entirely, a telltale sign I should have paid more attention to. I sat opposite them, a trusting fool, clutching the final acquisition documents, ready to share the incredible news, to finally earn their respect. Alara, my father began, his voice surprisingly soft, almost tender, a tone I hadn't heard directed at me in years. It should have been my first blaring warning, a siren in the quiet room. We need to talk about Quantum Leap, and more importantly, your future. My heart foolishly swelled with a desperate, childish hope, believing this was finally their acknowledgement, their long-overdue apology for years of dismissal and doubt. Oh, how devastatingly wrong I was. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, before Marcus cleared his throat, his gaze hardening. I leaned forward, eager, completely oblivious to the elaborate, cruel trap already sprung around me. The devastating truth was about to unravel, pulling the very ground from under my feet, leaving me feeling utterly exposed, betrayed, and adrift. And yet, here I am, now, smiling. The flickering fluorescent lights of the incubator office felt like a lifetime ago, a stark contrast to the panoramic city views from my penthouse now. I remember those days with a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Quantum Leap Innovations wasn't just a company, it was a living, breathing extension of me, forged in the crucible of countless sleepless nights and an unwavering belief in a single audacious idea. Another all-nighter, Alara. Mark, my co-founder and the only person who truly understood the depth of my obsession, would often ask, his voice thick with concern. I'd just grin, fueled by stale coffee and an unshakable vision. Someone has to rewrite the rules, Mark. And rewrite them, we did. Our innovative product, a neural network designed to predict market fluctuations with unheard-of accuracy, started as a jumble of lines on a whiteboard. I lived and breathed those algorithms, meticulously tweaking, debugging, and refining. There were moments of despair, of course. The investor who laughed us out of his office, the countless rejections, the sheer weight of responsibility. But then there were the breakthroughs, the little victories that tasted sweeter than anything I'd ever known. The first successful beta test, the initial trickle of users, then the flood. Seeing Quantum Leap Innovations splashed across tech journals, hearing our name whispered in venture capital circles, it was surreal. I sacrificed everything. Relationships withered, hobbies became distant memories, and my social life dwindled to a series of frantic emails and late-night coding sessions. But it was worth it. Every single drop of sweat, every missed family dinner, every moment of self-doubt vanquished by a stubborn belief in my own ingenuity. The company grew, not just in size, but in prestige. We became a name, a force to be reckoned with. And now, after all these years, after all this relentless striving, the acquisition deal was on the table. $10 million. The number seemed almost abstract, a dizzying sum that would finally validate every struggle, every sacrifice. It wasn't just money, it was freedom, security, the ultimate affirmation of my life's work. I trusted the process, trusted my team, and most importantly, I trusted my family, who had always been my rock. They had seen the struggle, witnessed the triumphs, and I knew deep down that their support was as unwavering as my own dedication. The future felt bright, blindingly so. This was the moment I had worked for, a new beginning. I couldn't wait to share it with them, to show them that their faith in me wasn't misplaced. Little did I know, some trust is a fragile thing, easily shattered. The scent of burnt rosemary still clung to my clothes, a phantom reminder of Sunday dinner at my father, Marcus's house. He'd always prided himself on his gourmet attempts, which usually ended with some herb or another singed to a crisp. And then there was Brenda, my stepmother, hovering like a well-dressed vulture, ready to pick apart any perceived flaw. They were a package deal, Marcus and Brenda, a duo of dismissive sighs and thinly veiled judgment, especially when it came to my life choices. "Another one of your little ventures, darling?" Brenda would coo, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Marcus, meanwhile, would simply grunt, his attention usually fixed on the financial section of the newspaper. Entrepreneurship to them was a whimsical hobby for those without real jobs. I could still hear their laughter echoing from that disastrous Christmas 5 years ago, after I'd enthusiastically pitched my first business idea. "Stick to something safe, Alara," Marcus had advised, not unkindly, but with a paternalistic pat that felt more like a dismissal. "The world isn't built for dreamers." I'd tried to ignore them, to focus on the hum of conversation around the heavy oak table, but the atmosphere was thick with an unspoken agenda. It always was, when they invited me over. The topic, predictably, veered toward the upcoming acquisition. Marcus cleared his throat, a sound I knew heralded an interrogation. "So this deal, it's quite substantial, isn't it, Alara?" He'd asked, his eyes, usually so distant, now gleaming with an unsettling intensity. Brenda beside him merely nodded, her gaze fixed on me, a calculating gleam in their depths that made my skin prickle. I offered a non-committal response, trying to downplay the figures, but it was useless. They had heard whispers, no doubt, from their own network of gossip mongers. The air around them seemed to shimmer with an avarice I hadn't noticed so distinctly before. It was a hunger, raw and undisguised, that made my stomach churn. I saw it in the way Brenda unconsciously licked her lips, in the slight widening of Marcus's eyes as I spoke of potential numbers. It was more than just a passing interest in my success. It was a predatory focus on the spoils. A cold, unfamiliar shiver traced its way down my spine. It was a subtle thing, a tiny internal alarm bell, but it rang clear. I'd always dismissed their comments as typical parental concern, perhaps a touch of envy. But this was different. This was a naked desire, a covetousness that suddenly made me question everything I thought I knew about my own family. The warmth of the roast chicken and the familiar clinking of silverware couldn't mask the unsettling truth I suddenly felt simmering beneath the surface. Their true colors might be far darker than I had ever allowed myself to believe. The phone vibrated on my desk, startling me from the intricate details of a financial projection. "Leo," I answered, trying to inject some warmth into my voice that I didn't quite feel. My cousin, Leo, rarely called unless he wanted something. "Alara, my dearest cousin, heard the news. Big acquisition, huh? You must be swimming in cash." His voice was a little too jovial, a little too interested. I frowned, a prickle of unease already starting in my stomach. "It's a significant transaction, Leo." "Not quite swimming yet," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Details, Alara, details. Where's all that money going? Which bank is handling it? And the timing, the precise timing, for my own edification." He chuckled, a dry, almost insincere sound. My grip tightened on the phone. His questions weren't casual. They were pointed, almost demanding. This wasn't like Leo. He'd never shown such an acute interest in my business dealings before. A distinct chill snaked up my spine. Leo, those are rather private financial matters. Come on, Alara. Just a friendly chat. Family looking out for family, you know. Don't want you to get swindled. These big deals, they can be tricky. Lot of sharks out there. The word swindled hung in the air, a strangely specific choice. My heart pounded a little faster. Was he trying to warn me, or was there something else at play? The unease deepened, transforming into a nascent suspicion. I hedged, offering vague reassurances about my financial advisor's handling everything with utmost discretion. He persisted, circling back to the bank and the exact date, his voice a relentless hum in my ear. Finally, I managed to steer the conversation to a quick close, hanging up with a profound sense of disquiet. The call replayed in my mind long after. Leo's unusual intensity, his almost aggressive probing about the payout details, it didn't sit right. It felt off. The perfectly polished veneer of concern he'd tried to project cracked, revealing something far less benign beneath. My gut, usually reliable, screamed that something was wrong. This wasn't just a casual family check-in. It felt like an information-gathering expedition. A cold knot formed in my stomach. This escalating feeling of vulnerability, fueled by his strange questions, forced me to acknowledge a gnawing fear. In the high-stakes world of business, it was always wise to have contingencies. I had, in fact, briefly discussed with my legal team the possibility of a contingency plan for such a large transaction, a kind of insurance policy for my business interests. We'd framed it as standard due diligence, a routine precaution. At the time, it had seemed like an unnecessary extra step. Now, sitting alone in my office, the city lights blurring outside my window, it no longer felt optional. The nature of this precaution remained nebulous, a mere whisper of an idea, but it was there, a desperate flicker of self-preservation in the growing darkness. What it truly entailed, I wasn't entirely sure yet, but I knew, with chilling certainty, that I needed something. The final administrative steps of the Quantum Leap acquisition were a blur of legalese and official signatures, a dizzying dance of documents and digital transfers. Every paper I signed felt monumental, a physical manifestation of years of relentless work culminating in this moment. My signature, a bold flourish, committed the company, my life's blood, to a new future. After the final contracts were inked, the official transfer of funds began. $10 million. The number shimmered in my mind, a validation of every sacrifice, every doubt overcome. It was real, tangible, and now it was mine to protect. My financial advisor, a meticulous woman named Eleanor, had been invaluable. Alara, she'd advised, her voice crisp. With a sum this significant, standard domestic banking isn't enough. We need something more robust, more discreet. She suggested a new age offshore account, touting its unparalleled security features. My initial hesitation, a natural caution, was quickly overridden by her assurances. Think of it as a fortress, she'd explained. Digital, but impenetrable. It uses protocols far beyond what your typical bank offers. Unconventional data structuring and advanced encryption methods that make it virtually untraceable from the outside, even by sophisticated entities. It's the cutting edge of financial security for high-net-worth individuals. Her words painted a picture of absolute safety, a digital vault for my hard-earned capital. I nodded, convinced. The process of setting up the account and initiating the transfer was intricate, demanding my full attention. I remember the unique authentication steps, the multi-layered digital keys, the almost arcane jargon describing how my funds would be tokenized and distributed across secure global servers. It sounded incredibly advanced, a step into the future of finance. My sole focus was safeguarding that $10 million, ensuring my financial future was watertight after years of precarity. I thought of Marcus and Brenda's condescending remarks, Leo's probing questions, and felt a quiet satisfaction that I was finally putting my success beyond their reach, or anyone else's. This was my personal fortress, a bulwark against any future attempts to undermine my newfound stability. The transfer is complete, Eleanor confirmed a week later, her voice calm and professional over the phone. The funds are now secure in your offshore account. You'll receive a confirmation code shortly, and access details will be sent via encrypted mail. A wave of relief washed over me. I imagined my money, tucked away, safe from the grasping hands of a greedy world, especially those closest to me. This wasn't just about financial prudence, it was about emotional security. I had done everything right. I had covered every angle, or so I believed. My hard work was finally safe. Little did I know, the foolproof plan I was so diligently executing was about to become the very key to my undoing. The email pinged, a simple confirmation. A tiny seed of unease, easily dismissed as post-stress jitters, barely registered. The air in my penthouse felt unusually heavy that morning, even for a June day. A strange, almost suffocating stillness. It was the day. The day after the acquisition funds had supposedly cleared, the culmination of years of relentless effort. My new offshore account, a discreet vault for the $10 million, was waiting. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, the click of a button, the confirmation of a life irrevocably changed. I logged in, my fingers trembling slightly with anticipation, not nervousness. The screen flickered, a loading circle spinning lazily. Then, the stark digital slap. Access denied. My breath hitched. Denied? What was this? A glitch, surely. I tried again, my brow furrowing, a tiny seed of unease beginning to sprout in my stomach. The same message. A cold dread began to creep through me, replacing the triumphant flutter of moments before. Frantic, I grabbed my phone, dialing the bank's dedicated wealth management line. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the growing silence in the room. Quantum Leap Innovations Holdings, I managed, my voice sounding strangely thin, even to my own ears. I'm trying to access my account, and it's denying me. The customer service representative's voice was calm, almost annoyingly so, as she pulled up my file. Ah, yes, Ms. Vance, we show a recent redirection of funds. Redirection? What are you talking about? My voice was rising, a desperate edge I couldn't control. I didn't authorize any redirection. Our records indicate the funds were transferred yesterday to an account in the Cayman Islands, authorized by a verified third party. We have legitimate documentation, including a notarized power of attorney. Cayman Islands? Power of attorney? My mind reeled. Who? How? My family, my trusted inner circle, flashed through my thoughts. No, it couldn't be. Not them. Just as the bank representative continued to drone on about protocols and signed documents, my laptop pinged. A new email. My hand shook as I clicked it open. The subject line was stark. Regarding your assets. My blood ran cold when I saw the sender, Marcus, Brenda, and Leo. The words blurred through a sudden, blinding haze of tears. Taken control of your funds, financially irresponsible, protecting her assets. The screen swam before my eyes. Marcus, my brother, my confidant. Brenda, my aunt, who I loved like a second mother. Leo, my cousin, who I'd put through college. Them. They had done this. My world, built on trust and a lifetime of shared memories, didn't just shatter. It imploded. The air was sucked from my lungs, leaving only a vast, echoing void of pure, unadulterated devastation. It couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. My own family. The world had fractured. One moment I was standing on solid ground. The next, the earth had crumbled beneath my feet, sending me spiraling into an abyss of disbelief. My hands, I noticed, were shaking. A violent tremor that started in my fingertips and spread through my entire body. I tried to clench them into fists, to anchor myself, but they refused to obey. They just kept quivering, mimicking the chaos raging inside me. A hot, stinging sensation pricked at my eyes. I blinked, trying to clear the sudden blur, but it only intensified, threatening to spill over. Tears. Unbidden, unwelcome tears. I swallowed hard, a dry, rasping sound in my throat, desperate to push them back, to maintain some semblance of control, but the sheer weight of what had just happened was too immense. It was like a physical force, pressing down on my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. I gasped, a small choked sound, as if I'd been punched in the gut. All the oxygen seemed to have vanished from the room, leaving me lightheaded, disoriented, helplessness. That was the overwhelming sensation, a complete and utter paralysis in the face of such a monstrous injustice. My mind, usually so sharp, so quick, felt sluggish, mired in a thick fog of dread. No, this can't be real. I repeated the words like a mantra, a desperate prayer against the horrifying reality that was clawing its way into my consciousness. My phone, clutched in my trembling hand, felt impossibly heavy. I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hovering over Marcus's name. He would explain. He had to explain. My father. He couldn't do this. I tapped the screen, the call tone ringing in my ear, each chime a hammer blow against my fragile hope. It rang once, twice, then a flat, emotionless voice informed me the number was no longer in service. My breath hitched. Then Brenda. Surely Brenda would answer. Maybe it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. The same infuriating, cold voice. Blocked. I tried Leo, my fingers fumbling, my vision swimming. Blocked too. Every single avenue, every single thread of connection, severed. That was when the full, crushing realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. They were gone. All of it. My company, my future, my trust. Betrayed. Utterly, completely betrayed. The strength drained from my legs and I sank to the floor. The cold tiles a stark contrast to the burning ache in my chest. The unshed tears finally broke free, hot rivers carving paths down my cheeks. A sob tore through me, raw and uncontrolled, followed by another and another, until I was a shaking, gasping mess, huddled on the cold floor, the shattered pieces of my world scattered around me. The silence in the room screamed of their treachery, and I was left with nothing but the echo of my own broken heart. The stale air in the police station clung to me, heavy with the scent of disinfectant and despair. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This was it. My last resort. I had to report it, even if the words felt like ash in my mouth. I'd like to report a theft, I managed to say to the officer behind the scratched counter, my voice barely a whisper. He looked up from his computer, his expression flat. Details, ma'am. Details. How do you explain a carefully orchestrated betrayal involving offshore accounts and a web of family lies to someone who clearly just wants to get home for dinner? I fumbled for the words, my mind a chaotic whirlwind of dates, numbers, and the faces of those who had done this to me. It's my inheritance. It's gone. From an offshore account. My family, they've taken it. The officer's eyebrows rose, a slow, disbelieving arch. Offshore, you say? And your family? He scribbled something on a pad, his pen scratching loudly in the silence. I could feel his skepticism radiating off him, a palpable wave of doubt. He clearly saw this as a messy domestic squabble, not the calculated theft it was. My cheeks burned with humiliation. I must have looked like a hysterical woman, rambling about money I couldn't even point to on a map. He finally ushered me into a small windowless office where another officer, equally unimpressed, took down my statement. I tried to explain the intricacies, the timing of the transfers, the sudden disappearance of my access, but each word felt inadequate, hollow. How could they understand the invisible threads of trust that had been so cruelly severed? It was humiliating, trying to make them see the magnitude of what had happened when it all sounded so convoluted. I felt tears welling, not just from the loss, but from the sheer frustration of being disbelieved. Then came the demand for documents. Any proof of these accounts, ma'am? Statements? Legal agreements? My stomach churned. The only legal documents I possessed were the ones my family had so kindly provided. The fabricated papers designed to make me look like I'd mismanaged everything, signed away my rights, and essentially orchestrated my own downfall. They were poison, disguised as evidence. With a trembling hand, I pulled them from my bag, the crisp paper feeling like a betrayal against my fingertips. These are what they sent me. The officer skimmed them, his lips pursed. He didn't even need to say it. His expression screamed financial mismanagement. The documents, intended to be my proof, only seemed to solidify the illusion of my own incompetence. They cemented the narrative that I was a foolish woman who had squandered her inheritance, rather than a victim of a cruel plot. I left the station with a police report number and a hollow ache in my chest. No promises of investigation, no words of comfort, just the cold, hard reality of bureaucracy. The theft itself was devastating, but this dismissal, this almost casual disbelief, amplified the feeling of utter helplessness. I was truly alone, and the nightmare was far from over. The police had offered little more than platitudes and a case number, leaving me feeling even more exposed than before. My next desperate step was to find legal representation, someone who could cut through the murky family drama and reclaim what was rightfully mine. I found myself sitting across from Arthur Finch, a highly recommended corporate lawyer known for his sharp mind and even sharper fees. His office was minimalist, sleek, and intimidating, much like the man himself. He listened patiently as I recounted the entire, sordid tale. My company, the acquisition, the $10 million, and my family's callous, premeditated betrayal. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the tremor in my hands betrayed the raw emotional wound festering inside me. "It wasn't just theft, Mr. Finch," I insisted, my voice cracking despite my efforts. "It was a calculated, malicious act by my own father, my stepmother, my cousin. They used fabricated documents. They preyed on my trust." I laid out the chilling email, the fake legal papers Marcus had sent, the ones claiming I was financially irresponsible. My heart pounded, hoping he would see the injustice, the clear-cut crime. He meticulously examined the papers, his brow furrowed in concentration, but his expression remained unreadable, devoid of the empathy I so desperately craved. After a long, agonizing silence, he finally spoke, his tone measured, almost detached. "Ms. Vance, this is complicated." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Fraud within a family unit is notoriously difficult to prosecute. It often boils down to one word against another, masked by what appears to be a legitimate transfer of assets, especially with the documents they've presented." My stomach dropped. "These papers," he continued, tapping the fabricated deed, "while suspicious, are crafted to appear legally sound on the surface. They've gone to great lengths to make this look like a paternal intervention rather than outright theft. Proving malice and intent, especially against close relatives, requires an incredibly high bar of evidence." He then outlined the daunting path ahead. We'd be looking at a lengthy and incredibly expensive civil battle, possibly spanning years. Discovery alone would be a nightmare. And even then, he sighed, a gesture that felt like the final nail in my coffin. The outcome would be highly uncertain. Family courts tend to favor mediation, compromise, not outright criminal conviction in cases like this, unless there's irrefutable, undeniable proof of criminal intent. He made it sound hopeless, a losing battle before it had even begun. My chest tightened, a crushing weight settling on my lungs. The legal labyrinth he described was impenetrable, twisting and turning into an endless void. My last flicker of hope, already fragile, dwindled, suffocated by the cold, hard realities of the law. How could I fight them when the very system seemed to protect their lies? I felt a profound despair, trapped, utterly helpless against their calculated cruelty. The city, once a vibrant tapestry of opportunity and my personal playground, now felt like a giant, gaping maw, ready to swallow me whole. Every street corner held a potential ambush, every cafe a gauntlet of judging eyes. The news of my financial ruin, the kind that travels faster than wildfire through the gilded cages of the elite, had spread. I could feel it, like a tangible shroud of shame wrapped around me. Yesterday, at the usual Tuesday networking lunch, a former colleague, Richard from Sterling Capital, approached my table. His smile, usually a predatory smirk, was now softened by a sickly sweet sympathy. "Ilara, old friend," he began, his voice a low, mournful drone. "Heard about everything. So sorry. Truly devastating." I just nodded, my throat tight. Devastating was an understatement. It was a complete annihilation of everything I'd built, everything I was. He gave my shoulder a soft, condescending pat before moving on, leaving behind a faint scent of pity that made my skin crawl. Later, I saw Clara, a venture capitalist I'd once done a major deal with. She merely offered a fleeting, almost imperceptible glance, her eyes laced with a curious mix of concern and something darker, something akin to relief that it wasn't her. It was the kind of look that said, "There but for the grace of God," and it burned more than any outright insult. The whispers followed me like a pack of hungry wolves. "Did you hear about Alara Vance? Lost everything." Her own family, apparently. Can you imagine? Each hushed word was a tiny, sharp shard of glass embedding itself in my already wounded pride. I used to walk into these rooms with a quiet confidence, an aura of success. Now I felt exposed, stripped bare, every failure and misstep laid out for public consumption. The weight of it was crushing. I found myself avoiding eye contact, keeping my head down, wishing the ground would simply open up and swallow me whole. The shame was a physical ache, a constant knot in my stomach. I, Alara Vance, the visionary, the titan of tech, was now the subject of gossip, a cautionary tale whispered over expensive coffees. The fall from grace was not just financial, it was existential. I was no longer the architect of my destiny, but a victim, adrift in a sea of public scrutiny. The isolation was profound, a chasm separating me from everyone I once knew. What was left of me now, truly? The key felt heavy in my hand, a leaden weight as I pushed open the door to my apartment. It used to feel like a sanctuary, a vibrant reflection of everything I'd built. Now it was just silent. An echoing, hollow silence that pressed in on me, suffocating. The polished marble floors, the custom-built bookshelves overflowing with the titles I'd devoured on my journey to success, the sleek, minimalist furniture that had once felt so invigorating. Now it all felt cold. Alien. Each step I took resonated in the stillness, a stark reminder of how truly alone I was. My gaze drifted over the expensive, carefully curated pieces. That velvet armchair, where I'd spent countless nights poring over business plans, fueled by coffee and an unshakable belief in my vision. The grand piano in the corner, a gift to myself after securing my first major investment, its keys now gathering dust, a silent monument to a future that felt irrevocably stolen. Everything in this apartment, every single item, was a testament to the ambitious life I had painstakingly built, brick by painstaking brick. I ran a hand over the cool surface of the quartz countertop in the kitchen. I remembered sketching out the initial blueprints for my company on this very spot, fueled by a boundless optimism that now felt like a cruel joke. The future I had envisioned had been so vivid, so tangible: international expansion, philanthropic endeavors, a legacy built on innovation and integrity. And then the ultimate irony, the tragic twist. The deep, unwavering trust I had placed in my own family, in Marcus and Brenda, in Leo. It was a trust that had been shattered into a million irreparable pieces, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. The vastness of the living room, once a space for lively discussions and celebratory gatherings, now stretched before me like an empty chasm. The afternoon sun, usually so cheerful, streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny, mocking reminder of the life that had been so cruelly taken from me. The silence wasn't just an absence of sound, it was a presence, heavy and oppressive, symbolizing the gaping void that now existed within me.
I sank onto the sofa, the plush cushions offering no comfort. My body felt heavy, my limbs leaden. There was nothing left. No drive, no spirit, no hope. Just this overwhelming, crushing defeat. I was utterly spent, completely drained. This wasn't just a loss of wealth or a business. It was a complete stripping away of who I was. I was a shattered woman, completely stripped of my ambition, my purpose, my very essence. I had reached my absolute lowest point, with no idea how to claw my way back from this desolate emptiness. The days blurred into a monotonous cycle of despair. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a tomb. I barely moved from the sofa, the blinds drawn, the world outside a distant, uncaring hum. Each breath was a struggle, each thought a painful reminder of what I'd lost. My phone, a device I now largely ignored, buzzed with an incoming text. I almost didn't look, convinced it would be another bill or a well-meaning but ultimately useless platitude from a distant acquaintance. But something, a flicker of curiosity born from sheer desolation, made me pick it up. It was from Alex. Alex, my old college friend, now some kind of genius in cybersecurity, always off on exotic assignments for big corporations. His messages were usually about his latest escapade or some ridiculously complex tech problem he'd solved. This one was different. Heard what happened? Don't worry. Remember what we talked about way back when? My brow furrowed. Heard what happened? Of course he had. News traveled fast, especially when it involved public figures and spectacular financial ruin. Don't worry. A simple, kind sentiment, the sort of thing a good friend would say. It warmed a tiny, frozen corner of my heart, a brief respite from the icy grip of hopelessness. But then, the last part. Remember what we talked about way back when? I reread it, my thumb tracing the words on the screen. What had we talked about way back when? College days were a blur of later-night study sessions, questionable cafeteria food, and endless theoretical debates. We'd discussed everything from the ethics of AI to the future of digital currency. He was always full of grand, elaborate ideas, even then. I dismissed it as him being Alex, always a little cryptic, always thinking several steps ahead of everyone else. It was probably just a nod to some long-forgotten abstract conversation about resilience or overcoming adversity, a general sentiment of support couched in his typically eccentric way. Just Alex being Alex. I sighed a long, shaky breath and let my hand drop, the phone landing softly beside me on the cushion. The message, though comforting in its intent, didn't really change anything. It was a kind gesture from a loyal friend, nothing more, a fleeting warmth in the overwhelming cold. It couldn't bring back my money, couldn't undo the betrayal. My despair settled back over me, thick and suffocating, yet a tiny, almost imperceptible shift had occurred. A minuscule disturbance in the suffocating quiet of my sorrow. It was so faint, I almost missed it. A fleeting thought, a shadow of a memory, too quick to grasp, but it was there. A spark of something. I couldn't
name it, couldn't focus on it, but it lingered. A question, unasked, about what way back when truly meant, and why, for a fleeting second, it had resonated with more than just simple nostalgia. The dark curtain of my sorrow remained firmly drawn, but perhaps, just perhaps, a pinprick of light had appeared. The sterile scent of antiseptic and stale coffee in Arthur Finch A.'s office was still clinging to me when I finally made my escape. My performance had been flawless, another convincing display of a heartbroken victim. But as the taxi sped away, the facade began to crack, replaced by a quiet, simmering energy that had been dormant for months. I directed the driver to a discreet, soundproofed private office suite nestled within a nondescript building on the city's outskirts. The kind of place you only know about if you were me. My heart hammered, not with fear, but with a potent cocktail of anticipation and triumph. This was it. The moment I'd played 1,000 times in my head. Alex was already there, leaning against a sleek minimalist desk, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. His dark eyes, usually analytical, held a spark of shared excitement. He wasn't just my cybersecurity expert. He was my confidant, the one person who knew the full, intricate tapestry of my grand design. My posture, which had been slumped with manufactured despair for so long, straightened. My eyes, no longer clouded by feigned tears, gleamed with the sharp, calculating intelligence that had built Quantum Leap Innovations. My voice, which I'd carefully pitched to sound soft and pained for public consumption, was now calm, controlled, and brimming with the suppressed triumph I'd craved for so long. "It's time," I said, a breathy whisper that held the weight of months of planning. They took the bait. Alex's grin widened, confirming our unspoken understanding. Every single one of them, right on schedule. I moved to a large screen on the wall, bringing up schematics and timelines. The $10 million they stole? My voice hardened, a delicious edge to it. It wasn't real money at all. Untraceable, high-quality counterfeit currency, meticulously crafted by your specialist team months prior, Alex. Remember those unconventional data structures I mentioned for the offshore account? That was the ghost account, designed to perfectly mimic a real transfer, allowing them to believe they had successfully moved my actual funds. I could practically feel the surprise radiating from the hypothetical audience I was narrating to, a rush of excitement knowing they were finally in on my secret. And the legal documents they used, the ones that proved my financial irresponsibility, I continued, a cold amusement in my tone. Subtly manipulated versions of real legal agreements they had unknowingly signed during that minor patent negotiation last year. Small print, buried clauses, their greed blinded them to the details, just as I'd predicted. I had suspected their avarice for years, felt it festering beneath their thinly veiled disdain. For months before the betrayal, I had been meticulously planning this precise counter-operation, watching them, guiding them, setting every piece of this elaborate trap. My supposed victimhood was nothing but an elaborate, heartbreaking facade. And now, the true game began. Chapter 14, The Blueprint of Revenge. Alex just stared at me, his usual cool demeanor replaced by a look of utter, almost comical awe. He hadn't said a word since I'd finished the broad strokes, and now, leaning back in my plush office chair, a quiet satisfaction settled over me. This was it. This was the moment I got to unveil the true artistry of it all. "So," I began, a slow smile spreading across my face, "let's talk about the details. The real beauty is in the layers, wouldn't you agree?" He nodded, still speechless. "Good. That's exactly the reaction I wanted. The money, for instance," I continued, gesturing vaguely towards the memory of those neatly stacked bundles. "Everyone thinks it was just a simple transfer, a cash grab. But every single bundle of that counterfeit money, yes, counterfeit, had a tiny, untraceable GPS tracker embedded deep within the core. Not just one, mind you, but multiple in each, disguised as part of the binding. It's how I've been able to track their every move, every nervous twitch with that stolen fortune." Alex's eyebrows shot up. "Counterfeit?" he finally managed, a slight tremor in his voice. "Oh, absolutely. The real funds? Tucked away, safe and sound, long before they ever thought they had a chance to touch them. But that's just the financial bait. The truly satisfying part is the evidence." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "For over a year, Alex, over a year I've been recording them. Sophisticated, micro-thin devices, seamlessly integrated into their homes, tucked into the spines of books on their shelves, even sewn into the lining of the family picnic blanket during our innocent summer gatherings. Every greedy whisper, every incriminating statement, every single vile plot hatched against me. I have it all. Crystal clear." He whistled softly. "That's meticulous." "It's precision," I corrected, a glint in my eye. "And the best part? I didn't just react to their betrayal, I orchestrated it. I fed them the idea, subtly, of course. Planted the seeds of opportunity, whispered about my financial vulnerabilities, in carefully curated conversations, even exaggerated my trust in them. I guided them right into their own trap. Marcus's arrogance, his absolute certainty that he was the smartest one in the room, that's what made him bite first. Brenda's impulsive greed, her inability to resist a quick score, that ensured she'd follow. And poor, naive Leo. He just wanted to impress them, to be part of the family business. Each flaw, a perfectly placed cog in my machine. They think they've outsmarted me. They think they're basking in their ill-gotten gains. But they're not. They're simply moving chess pieces on my board right where I want them to be. And the final move? It's going to be exquisite. The trap was sprung, and they were already caught. They just didn't know it yet. The city lights blurred past the car window, a vibrant, shifting kaleidoscope. But my focus was entirely on the glowing map on Alex's tablet. We were a formidable team, he and I, a silent, efficient unit, perfectly synchronized. This was it, the active phase. My heart beat a steady, powerful rhythm, not with fear, but with a thrilling anticipation. GPS map navigation app on tablet screen. Location tracker concept. They're moving, Alex murmured, his voice low, his finger tracing a pulsating red dot across the digital street grid. Looks like a downtown bank. Surprising they'd risk a direct deposit. A ghost of a smile touched my lips. Risk? They had no idea the true risk they were taking. The hidden trackers so meticulously placed were singing to me. Every movement, every transaction, every attempt to launder my carefully crafted bait was being relayed directly to us. It was a beautiful symphony of their undoing. I pictured Marcus, probably in a cheap suit, trying to look respectable. Brenda beside him, radiating an aura of false confidence. They were attempting to invest their ill-gotten gains, no doubt believing themselves clever, untraceable. They thought they were building a new empire with my money. The profound irony was almost too delicious to bear. They're inside, Alex confirmed, his eyes narrowed on the screen. Staying in there a while. I imagined their faces, perhaps a flicker of nervousness, quickly masked by their inherent greed. They were likely opening accounts, making small deposits, trying to blend the counterfeit with legitimate funds. Every step they took, every forged document, every lie they whispered to a bank teller, was a thread in the noose they were meticulously weaving around their own necks. It was exquisite. Later that evening, after a failed attempt to buy a high-end luxury car with a significant portion of the cash, the dealer raised a flag. Alex reported a hint of amusement in his tone. They started to get desperate. The red dots on the map began to move more erratically, leading us to increasingly suspicious, increasingly illegal activities. An offshore shell company discussed over a tapped phone line, a meeting in a dimly lit back room with individuals Alex's network identified as known money launderers. Each misstep, each clumsy blunder, was a testament to their amateurish arrogance. I watched them, calm and almost detached, as they unknowingly dug their own grave with every passing hour. They were using fake money to commit very real, very traceable crimes. It was a masterpiece of self-destruction. The hunt had truly begun, and my prey, so utterly convinced of their cleverness, remained completely unaware they were nothing more than fish swimming directly into my net. The scent of stale coffee and impending victory hung heavy in the air of Alex's apartment. Days had bled into nights as we hunched over his sophisticated audio equipment, meticulously sifting through the hours of conversations I'd so carefully recorded. The sheer volume of Leo's incessant chatter had been tedious to collect, but now the dividends were paying off. Every word, every boast, every careless whisper was a nail in their coffin. "Here," Alex mumbled, his eyes glued to the oscillating waveforms on his screen. "Listen to this," around the 47-minute mark. I leaned in, my heart quickening. Leo's voice, amplified and chillingly clear, filled the small room. He was recounting something to an unknown party, his tone smug, dripping with self-satisfaction. "And then she went to the police, bless her heart," Leo cackled. "Told them about the offshore accounts and her inheritance, as if they'd ever believe a word without concrete proof. Especially when we had all the paperwork showing her gross incompetence." My jaw tightened. The humiliation of that police visit, the skepticism in the officer's eyes, the sense of utter helplessness, it all flooded back. But now it was a weapon. His words, casually delivered, were a confession. "Timestamp that, Alex," I said, my voice steady, devoid of the emotional tremor I used to feign. "This is golden." We pressed on, hour after agonizing hour. Leo, it turned out, was a veritable geyser of incriminating information. He was so utterly convinced of his own genius, so oblivious to the tiny microphones hidden in plain sight, that he couldn't resist gloating. He detailed the methods, the phishing emails, the carefully constructed shell companies, the layers of misdirection designed to make it look like my fault. Remember that little trick with the signatory change? His voice boomed from the speakers. Old man thought it was brilliant, said it tied up all the loose ends, made it watertight, and Helena, she just sat back and watched, pretending to be so sympathetic. The perfect picture of concern, right? A cold, hard satisfaction bloomed in my chest. Old man, that could only mean his father, my uncle, and Helena, his stepmother. The web was unraveling, thread by thread. They weren't just complicit, they were active participants, gleefully orchestrating my supposed downfall. "This is it, Alara," Alex said, his voice hushed with a hint of awe. "This is everything. The coordinated effort, the malicious intent, the specific actions, it's all here, laid out by their own idiot son." We had direct quotes, explicit details of the fraud, and clear implications of their involvement. Leo, in his hubris, had gifted me the undeniable evidence I needed. This wasn't just suspicion, it was irrefutable proof, the crucial, undeniable pillar, and it was going to bring them all crashing down. The recordings of Leo's frantic calls, Marcus's increasingly desperate financial maneuvers, and Brenda A.'s ill-advised attempts to funnel the counterfeit money through shell corporations. It was all accumulating beautifully. Every piece of damning evidence we'd gathered painted a picture of pure, unadulterated greed, perfectly setting the stage for the next act. Alex had compiled everything into neat, encrypted packages, ready for deployment. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a phantom tingling of power. This was where the trap shifted from observation to active manipulation. "Are we ready for the first drop?" Alex asked, his voice low, almost reverent, as he watched me. He understood the stakes, the precision required. My eyes scanned the multiple monitors displaying intricate network maps and timelines. "Ready," I confirmed, a predatory satisfaction humming beneath my skin. This phase felt like an intricate chess game, where I played every piece on the board, unseen and unheard, against opponents too arrogant to notice they were already in check. My first move was subtle, designed to be dismissed as a random anomaly. An anonymous tip to a financial crimes unit, hinting at a large, uncharacteristic cash deposit into one of Marcus's obscure investment accounts. Not enough to trigger a full-blown investigation immediately, but just enough to flag it for future scrutiny, a tiny, almost imperceptible digital breadcrumb. Next, an equally anonymous whisper, sent through a secure dark web channel, about suspicious activity related to high-value art purchases by a shell company Brenda had recently set up. The art market, I knew, was a favorite playground for money launderers, a perfect place to plant seeds of doubt. I then crafted a meticulously detailed yet misleading report of a supposed data breach at a minor offshore bank, one my family was, ironically, about to use to try and move more funds. This report, leaked to a specific cybersecurity forum, contained just enough fabricated details to be plausible, and just enough vague connections to their known associates to draw the attention of the right authorities. My family, in their haste and overconfidence, would stumble into this carefully laid false trail, mistaking it for genuine opportunity. They'd follow these loopholes, thinking they were being clever, diving deeper into a web of financial irregularities that would undoubtedly draw official scrutiny. "They're going to step right into it, aren't they?" Alex murmured, watching the lines of code cascade down my screen. My smile was cold, sharp. They already have, Alex. They just don't know it yet. The beauty of it lay in its inevitability. Their own desperate actions, fueled by their insatiable greed, were pulling the strings now. I was simply guiding their hands towards the very jaws of the trap. The pressure was building, a slow, invisible squeeze. Soon, the game would no longer be about subtle hints, but about undeniable consequences. The symphony of my orchestrations was finally reaching its crescendo. I pictured them, my dear family, perched precariously on their self-made precipice, oblivious that the ground beneath them was not just unstable, but actively crumbling. It had been a delicate dance, subtly nudging the dominoes, watching them fall one by one. Marcus, with his insufferable bravado, was the first to show the cracks. I imagined his face, usually a mask of smug assurance, contorting with frustration as his grand schemes to invest their ill-gotten gains hit snag after snag. I'd specifically designed the counterfeit bills to trigger very particular alarms in the financial system. Nothing too obvious, just enough to raise a red flag, a whisper of suspicion. "The bank just froze the transfer, Marcus," I overheard Brenda shriek during one of my perfectly timed routine maintenance checks on their home audio. Her voice, usually so clipped and composed, was laced with panic. "They said something about irregularities and enhanced due diligence." Marcus's retort was a low growl. "Don't be an idiot, Brenda. It's just a hiccup. These things happen with offshore accounts. Probably some new compliance nonsense." But even through the hidden microphone, I could detect the tremor of doubt in his tone. Leo, bless his simple heart, was the weakest link, and therefore, the most amusing to watch squirm. He'd tried to use some of the fake cash for a lavish down payment on a sports car, and the dealership had immediately flagged it. Not as counterfeit, mind you, but as suspiciously large cash transaction. A beautiful little thread for law enforcement to pull on. Sure enough, the innocuous inquiries began. Not about my stolen millions, of course, but about tax evasion, money laundering, anything that cast a long, uncomfortable shadow over their burgeoning wealth. I'd subtly fed information to a few carefully chosen, anonymous tip lines, just enough to pique curiosity, to suggest a larger, more intricate web of illicit activity. "Did you see the news? That report on offshore accounts? It's like they're looking right at us," Brenda wailed during another recorded conversation, her voice nearing hysteria. "They're always looking," Marcus snapped back, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Just keep your head down, and for God's sake, Leo, stop flashing that cash around like a lottery winner." The overconfidence that had fueled their betrayal was slowly, deliciously, curdling into raw paranoia. Every shadow held a threat, every stranger a potential investigator. They started eyeing each other, suspicion replacing their twisted camaraderie. Marcus blamed Brenda's impulsiveness. Brenda accused Marcus of being too careless, and Leo, caught in the middle, just mumbled about bad luck. The tension was a living, breathing thing in their gilded cage. And the best part? They had no idea who was pulling the strings. The walls were closing in, and they were too busy bickering to notice the architect of their demise. The summons arrived on Tuesday. An official-looking envelope slipped under my door. An invitation to speak with investigators. Excellent. The bait had been taken. The line was taut. I surveyed my reflection in the hallway mirror, practicing the slight tremor in my lower lip, the hint of wide-eyed bewilderment. This was my performance, my masterpiece. The interview room was sterile, cold. Two stern faces across a polished table. Detective Miller, a man whose gaze felt like it could strip paint, and Agent Davies, younger, with a deceptively kind smile. I offered them a small, shaky smile in return, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, feigning a nervousness that was miles from my actual composure. "Ms. Vance," Detective Miller began, his voice flat, "we'd like to ask you some questions regarding certain financial irregularities connected to your family members, Marcus Vance and Brenda Vance." My breath hitched, just slightly, perfectly. "My family?" I managed, my voice barely above a whisper, laced with just the right amount of shock. "Oh no, is everything all right? I haven't been able to reach them, you see. I've been so worried." The tears welling in my eyes were genuine in their sensation, if not in their cause. The grief I'd rehearsed felt surprisingly natural now. Agent Davies leaned forward, her expression sympathetic. "We understand this is difficult, Ms. Vance. We're just trying to understand their recent activities." "Activities?" I repeated, my brow furrowing in apparent confusion. I really don't know what you mean. After what happened with my company, I've been so lost, so heartbroken. They were so supportive, you know, when everything fell apart. Or, at least I thought they were. My voice broke on the last few words, and I let a single, perfect tear escape, tracing a path down my cheek. It's all been such a blur since. I just want them to be safe. We've seen some large transfers of funds, Miller pressed, and some unusual investments. I wrung my hands, a picture of distress. Investments? Marcus always talked about investing. He was so keen on it. He even mentioned some new opportunities he was looking into. But I was so wrapped up in my own pain, I didn't really pay attention. He said they were guaranteed big returns, something about a new innovative sector. He kept a lot of his papers, his important documents, in a locked cabinet in his home office, I think. Always so meticulous, my father. I offered a weak, watery smile, planting the seed without seeming to. A locked cabinet? Miller repeated, his eyes narrowing, taking the bait. Yes, I confirmed, my voice trembling. He always said a man's private affairs should remain private, Alara. I never thought much of it, just him being, well, him. I sniffled delicately, reaching for a tissue that Agent Davies silently offered. I just hope they're okay. This is all so confusing. The interview continued for another hour, a delicate dance of feigned ignorance and strategically placed breadcrumbs. Every shaky breath, every hesitant answer, every sniffle was perfectly calculated to paint me as the bewildered victim, completely unaware of the web my family had spun. They thought they were uncovering a crime. They had no idea they were simply following my carefully laid map. The calls started subtly, then escalated into a frantic barrage. I imagined the scene, painted vividly in my mind's eye. Marcus, red-faced and bellowing into a phone. Brenda, her usual composure fractured, her voice sharp with panic. Leo, bewildered, clinging to their coattails as his world imploded. Their perceived fortune, the ill-gotten gains they'd celebrated so prematurely, was now a phantom. I pictured Marcus at his desk, probably trying to transfer more funds, only to be met with the cold, impersonal hum of a frozen account. The first jolt of real fear. Then Brenda, attempting to access their various assets, discovering them inexplicably seized. The creeping dread. My sources had been precise. The investigations, initiated subtly weeks ago, were now in full swing, their nets cast wide and deep. What do you mean, frozen? I could almost hear Marcus's furious roar echoing through their lavish, soon-to-be foreclosed-upon home. They said it's under review. All of it. Brenda's voice, usually so clipped and precise, would be laced with a thin, reedy terror. The invisible force dismantling their lives was me, of course, a fact they were utterly oblivious to. They knew they were under scrutiny, that something massive was happening, but the why and the how remained a terrifying enigma. Their overconfidence, once so repellent, had now evaporated, replaced by a raw, visceral panic. The carefully constructed facade of their lives was cracking, revealing the pathetic, desperate individuals beneath. Arguments, I knew, were escalating into full-blown shouting matches. Accusations would be flying like poisoned darts. Marcus would blame Leo for his loose lips. Brenda would accuse Marcus of sloppy planning, and Leo, bewildered and out of his depth, would probably just whine about how he was the real victim. The harmony of their conspiracy, born of greed, was shattering under the weight of its spectacular failure. I pictured them, pacing their opulent living room, the space that had once symbolized their success, now a gilded cage. Their get-rich-quick scheme had backfired so magnificently, leaving them not with the millions they craved, but with nothing but a mountain of legal problems, frozen assets, and the horrifying realization that their carefully laid plans had utterly, inexplicably, failed. They were trapped, caught in a snare they couldn't see, unable to comprehend the architect of their downfall. And I, Alara, the supposed victim, watched from the shadows, a faint, satisfied smile playing on my lips. The trap was sprung. The walls were closing in, exactly as planned. Marcus E.'s frantic calls to shell companies were being monitored by the very authorities I had anonymously tipped off. Brenda's attempts to liquidate assets were hitting one legal roadblock after another. And poor, foolish Leo was practically weeping to his friends about inexplicable financial freezes and looming audits. Their carefully constructed house of cards was crumbling, not from my direct assault, but from the weight of their own greed, amplified by my subtle nudges. It was time for the final act, the grand unveiling. I sat at my desk, surrounded by drafts of invitations. This wasn't just a summons, it was a psychological weapon, crafted with the precision of a surgeon. My objective: to lure them willingly into a confined space where their escape would be impossible and their reckoning undeniable. The venue was crucial. I settled on the Blackwood estate, a sprawling, isolated property nestled deep within the countryside, a place my father, Marcus, had openly coveted for years, muttering about its grandeur and the family's rightful place among such luxury. Brenda, too, had always fixated on its opulent interiors, a symbol of the wealth she felt she deserved. They could never afford it, of course, but the desire had never faded. The wording of the invitation itself was a masterpiece of subtle manipulation. I drafted several versions, discarding any that sounded too accusatory or too innocent. The final version was elegantly formal, hinting at a critical family matter concerning future inheritances and a pathway out of their current difficulties. No threats, no accusations, just the irresistible glint of a potential solution, wrapped in the promise of more wealth. For Marcus, it was the mention of legacy. For Brenda, inheritance. And for Leo, simply resolution of financial woes. I knew their specific triggers intimately. The invitation played on their two enduring weaknesses, their insatiable greed and their desperate need to escape the legal quagmire I'd carefully orchestrated for them. "This will work," Alex affirmed, reviewing the final draft, a smile playing on his lips. "They're too desperate to refuse and too arrogant to suspect it's you pulling the strings." "Precisely," I murmured, satisfaction blooming in my chest. Every detail of this meeting had been meticulously planned, the timing, chosen for maximum legal impact, ensuring the authorities would be poised. The exact setting of the estate, its secluded nature perfect for both privacy and containment. The logistical setup, cameras, hidden microphones, secure entry points, was all arranged. I even planned the refreshments. Each element was designed not just to ensure their presence, but to amplify the shock of the reveal, to make their fall from grace as spectacular and undeniable as possible. The trap was set. All that was left was for the hungry mice to enter the maze. The heavy oak doors swung inward, revealing Marcus, Brenda, and Leo. They strode in, a bizarre tableau of arrogance and confusion. Marcus, still attempting to project an air of injured authority, Brenda, a simmering pot of barely contained anxiety, and Leo, looking utterly bewildered, as if he'd wandered into the wrong party. They still believed they held the upper hand, that this impromptu meeting was some desperate plea from a ruined woman. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on Marcus's lips. Pathetic. I stood waiting, perfectly poised in the center of the grand living room, the afternoon light streaming in through the panoramic windows. My silk dress, a deep sapphire blue, felt like a second skin, a skin of calm, unyielding power. I met their gaze, one by one, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. "So glad you could make it," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the coiled anticipation within me. "We have a lot to discuss." Marcus scoffed. "Discuss what, Ilara? Your latest misfortune? We've already done you a favor by protecting your assets." His words dripped with condescension. I simply chuckled, a low, melodic sound that seemed to vibrate in the suddenly silent room. "Protecting my assets? Oh, Marcus, you truly are a marvel of self-deception." I picked up a sleek remote from the coffee table. "No, we're here to discuss your assets. Or rather, your complete and utter lack thereof." I pressed a button. From hidden speakers embedded in the walls, their voices filled the room, chillingly clear. Brenda's frantic whisper. 10 million! Can you believe she just handed it over? Marcus's booming laughter. "The fool thinks we're looking out for her." Leo's nervous giggle. "Are you sure this power of attorney is ironclad?" The snippets were damning, a chronological tapestry of their greed and betrayal, pulled from months of carefully curated recordings. Their faces, moments ago smug, began to contort. Shock bloomed first, then disbelief, morphing into a dawning, sickening horror as they recognized their own voices, their own vile words echoing back at them. As the final incriminating recording faded, I gestured towards the large display cases that had been discreetly wheeled into the room. "And these," I announced, my voice cutting through the stunned silence, "are the fruits of your labor, the $10 million you so cleverly redirected." I swept a hand over the stacks of meticulously arranged counterfeit bills, shimmering under the soft spotlights. Every single detail, down to the subtle inks and the intentionally weak security threads, designed to fool only the most desperate and least observant of thieves. The fake bank accounts, the paper trail leading to nowhere but right back to you. Every step of your foolish conspiracy, meticulously planned by me. From the moment I first trusted you with my vulnerabilities, you walked right into the trap I laid. Brenda gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. Marcus's jaw hung slack, his eyes wide with a terror I had only dreamed of seeing. Leo looked like a child caught stealing candy, utterly broken. And now, I concluded, pressing another button on the remote, for the final act. The main door swung open once more. Uniformed officers, led by a stern-faced detective, entered the room, their presence an undeniable, inescapable reality. They moved with quiet purpose, their eyes already fixed on my family. The trap was sprung. And the look on their faces? Priceless. The flashing blue and red lights painted the meticulously manicured lawn in a grotesque, pulsing glow. The shout started first, sharp and desperate, then the metallic click of handcuffs. I stood at a distance, far enough to remain unseen, close enough to savor every single agonizing moment of their undoing. Marcus, his face contorted in a mask of outrage. Brenda, her perfectly coiffed hair askew, shrieking protests that dissolved into guttural wails. And Leo, his youthful arrogance crumbling into wide-eyed terror. Their pleas echoed, useless and pathetic, bouncing off the manicured hedges swallowed by the night. "This is a mistake!" Marcus roared, struggling against the officers. "You can't do this! I'm Marcus Vance!" His voice, once so dismissive, so self-assured, now cracked with a raw, impotent fury. Brenda, ever the dramatic one, crumpled to the ground, a heap of expensive fabric and desperate sobs. Leo just stared, his eyes darting wildly, finally comprehending the inescapable trap. No anger stirred within me, no lingering sorrow, only a profound, unshakable sense of satisfying justice. It was a cold, pure feeling, like distilled water, cleansing and absolute. "You see this?" I whispered, my voice carrying only to the wind, but aimed directly at their pathetic, struggling forms. "This isn't about petty revenge, not for me. This is about self-preservation, about protecting what was rightfully mine, what I built with my own hands, my own mind." My gaze hardened, fixed on Marcus as he was finally pulled to his feet. "You always thought I was the naive dreamer, didn't you, Father? The one who needed to be protected from the harsh realities of the world. But the only harsh reality I ever truly faced was your own insatiable greed. And yours, Brenda. And yours, Leo, for thinking you could simply ride on their coattails, benefiting from their malice." I took a slow, deep breath, the night air crisp and clean. "You tried to take everything from me, my company, my future, my very identity. But you underestimated me. You mistook my trust for weakness, my ambition for foolishness. And in doing so, you taught yourselves a bitter, unforgettable lesson about the true cost of avarice, about the inherent dangers of betrayal." Their struggles lessened as they were finally escorted to the waiting police vehicles. Their faces, caught in the pulsing blue light, were no longer those of sophisticated fraudsters, but of broken, humiliated individuals. "Your insatiable avarice," I continued, the words a low, steady hum, "ultimately consumed you. It wasn't my direct attack that destroyed your lives. It was your own hunger, your own moral bankruptcy. You did this to yourselves, far more effectively than I ever could have." The police car door slammed shut, a dull thud that resonated through the quiet night. The engines hummed, then roared to life, pulling away, taking my family and their sordid mess into the darkness. I watched until the taillights vanished, leaving only the lingering smell of ozone and a profound, exhilarating silence. The stage was empty, the reckoning complete, and I finally was truly in control. Months have passed since the dust settled, since the legal papers were signed, and the last of their pathetic pleas faded into the bureaucratic hum of the courts. The air I breathe now feels different, lighter, cleaner, imbued with a freedom I hadn't realized I'd lost. Quantum Leap Innovations hasn't just recovered, it's soared. The near catastrophe, The very thing they thought would break me, instead forged a steel resolve, making the company stronger, more innovative, and more successful than ever before. Every new contract, every successful launch is a quiet defiance, a testament to the power of resilience. I often reflect on the entire ordeal, not with bitterness, but with a strange, almost detached curiosity. The lessons were brutal, etched deep into my psyche. Trusting my instincts, that primal gut feeling I'd initially ignored, proved to be my salvation. The painful dance with deceit, the theatrical performance of victimhood, all led me here to this profound sense of peace. Reclaiming control of my life, of my narrative, has been the most liberating experience. The whispers of doubt are gone, replaced by an unwavering inner certainty. One crisp autumn evening, I found myself clinking glasses with Alex on my penthouse balcony, the city lights twinkling below like a scattered handful of diamonds. "To new beginnings," he murmured, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "And sweet vindication," I added, the warmth of the champagne matching the quiet satisfaction in my chest. Our shared secret, the intricate web we'd spun, had forged an unbreakable bond between us. He understood the nuances, the necessary deceptions, the intricate dance of reclaiming what was rightfully mine. There was no need for grand pronouncements, no elaborate recounting of events. A look, a shared laugh, was enough. The peace I feel now is profound, unwavering. It's the peace of a battle won, of a storm weathered, of a self fully realized. My strength isn't a facade, it's bedrock. And then there's Marcus, my father, the architect of my supposed ruin. The irony is almost too perfect, a quiet, delicious victory served cold. He's working again, I hear. Humbled, stripped of his former status, he landed a position at a new, smaller company. A direct competitor, in fact, to one of Quantum Leap's burgeoning subsidiary firms. His days of grand schemes and lavish living are over. Now he toils unwittingly under my indirect professional influence. Every report he files, every meeting he attends, every penny he earns, is, in a way, a quiet tribute to the daughter he tried to destroy. It's a subtle detail, a private satisfaction, but it cements the triumph. My new life isn't just about my peace, it's about his quiet, inescapable consequence.